name is Nekme Obasogie. I'm broadcasting from Toronto, Canada. Before I go ahead and do today's analysis, I would like to thank everyone that left comments on my previous videos. Thank you guys so much. My special thanks to those who are not Benins, who have been following our Benin programs. Thank you. I'm reading those comments. Very interesting. Thank you guys so much. For all my Benin people, I read those comments. Wonderful comments. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate that. And today's topic was recommended by someone, and it's very interesting. So it's about the Crown Prince, Edaiken Uselu. Edaiken Uselu is not a name, it's a chieftaincy title. Okay, and the title is restricted to only the Crown Prince. It is only the Crown Prince that can inherit that title. And Imaswen Izoduwa is going to analyze the history of Edaiken Uselu. The roots of this title can be traced back to the reign of Oba Ewari Ogirigan I, who ruled the Benin Kingdom in the 14th century. During that period, there was a man called Iken. He was such a powerful man that the Oba purposely sent him to war, hoping that he would die in the war. When Iken was leaving, he demanded for help from the Oba. He asked the Oba to help him to take care of his family while he is away. So the Oba decided to assign his first surviving son, Koboyuwa, to go to Uselu to take care of the family of Iken. So Iken went to war. Luckily for him, he survived. He didn't die in war. However, something happened. Anyway, Imaswen Izoduwa is going to do the full analysis of this history. It's very interesting. For those who are curious about why is it that the Crown Prince is always living in Uselu while the father will be in Benin, just listen to him.
All lover of history of Benin and culture, waya obevawu inime oe Imaswen Amowe Izoduwa. I particularly was asked to do something on the origin of the Edaikenship, or the origin of the title of Edaiken. As a proud historian like I am, I try to establish facts that culminated to the very event of the time at which the history of Edaiken was established. Of course, what we now call the Edaiken is largely attributed, or was created by Oba Ewari I Ogirigan, of course, who reigned between the year 1440 to 1473. That is a period of about 33 years. By hierarchy, Oba Ewari the first is the 44th Oba or king of Benin across the two dynasties, or the 13th Oba in the second dynasty. Of course, before I go further, I would like, before I go further in explaining the origin of Edaiken, the history behind it, I'll first of all establish, give a sort of a background knowledge to the proud listeners of Benin history and culture. Of course, we all know that there is an interregnum between the first dynasty and the second dynasty, and in the second dynasty, the first Oba of Benin was called Oromia, and a lot of Benins do regard him as Oba Odolori. So a lot of Benin historians, prior before now, refer to him as Oba Odolori, or popularly called Oromian. The Oromiyan had a son, which is regarded the Benin book as history remembered as Obayeweka the first, who is a proud grandson of a Caladeran. All right, and the Obayeweka the second had two sons, Uwaihwan and Ehemie. The Uwaihwan had no son. Uwaihwan being the first surviving son of Obayeweka the first, because Benin, it is an act of express primogeniture, the passage of one's right from the present holder to the first surviving son. So, of course, the primogeniture act of Benin started from the first king of Benin, Ogiso Igodo, of course. So that act was maintained across the two dynasties. So Uwaihwan, who is the third Oba in the second dynasty, had no son. So, but he had a daughter. History remembered her to be Princess Imadeyo. Now, take note, Princess Imadeyo, she's different from Princess Ideleyo. Princess Ideleyo was the daughter. She's a very popular princess in the history of Benin. She was one of the daughters of Obayewari the Great, she almost became Oba of Benin with the circumstances that prevailed. But being that that's not the reason for this history, so I don't want to digress from what I was asked to profile or to narrate. So Uwaihwan and Oba Uwaihwan had just a daughter, Princess Imadeyo. That Princess Imadeyo had a son, Prince Eligbe. All right, Eligbe, Prince Eligbe. Now, but because Uwaihwan was a direct son of Eweka the first, who was a direct son of Oromiya, the daughter could not become the Oba. Instead, his son, who was now maternally connected to the Oba line, wanted to become the Oba. One way or the other, he was the Benin chiefs disallowed him by subjecting him to some test, which he would have passed, but for reasons best known to the Benin chiefs, they realized that you cannot carry the female gene of of a paternal line to gain entrance. You have to be a direct line you have to be paternally related to the Oba line, to the Obaship, to the royalty before you can be granted the access. And that Prince Eligbe was only maternally related to royalty. So instead, Uwaihwan was the grandfather of that Prince Eligbe, was favored. His name was Ehemie. Ehemie was a younger brother to Oba Uwaihwan. So he now became Oba, and the Benins remembered him to be Oba Ehemie. So Oba Ehemie gave birth to Oba Ewedo. Then Oba Ewedo gave birth to Oba Ogwola. Oba Ogwola had two sons. Had three sons, not two sons. Had three sons. Edoni, who became an Oba. Second, Udagbedo, who became an Oba. And third, Ohen, who became an Oba. Ohen had four sons who also became Obas. The first was Egbeka, who is the 10th Oba of Benin. The second is Ohobiru, alright, who also became an Oba. Then the next was supposed to be Ewai the Great, but for some political skirmishes in the palace, Uwaifiokun, who was a younger brother to Prince Ogun, who eventually became Oba Ewai the first, became Oba first before his elder brother, who was Ewai. But from the intricacies, Obaewari or Prince Ogo was able to reclaim the throne of his fathers from his younger brother. So he now became Obaewari, the 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 first, who is the 13th Oba across the two dynasties, is the 44th Oba. Now, after Obaewari became the Oba, of course, he's the king who eventually had to expand Benin Kingdom into Benin Empire. He dug moats, he brought civilization to Benin people, and he revived because he came through a process where there was political instability in the kingdom. So he had to make the Benin Empire or Benin Kingdom, as he inherited, very stable. So in conquest of that, of course, he fought a lot of wars, and of course, the Benins never lost any war to anybody except to the British in 1897. So one is expected that every war that was fought at that time of Obaewari was roundedly won. And of course, we fought wars with a lot of Yoruba people, and none of them ever defeated us. In one of the war, there was a man popularly called Iken. He was like the overlord of a place now we now called Uselu. It was like the overlord of that area. It was the overlord of that area because that word Uselu had not existed until the until the great great grandson of Obaewari became the Oba, which was Esigi. The great great grandson of Obaewari was Oba Esigi. So the word Uselu had not existed at that time, but the area we now call Uselu was where Iken presided, had his household stationed. So Iken was a powerful man, envied by all. He was a man with so much worth. He was a man with so much dexterity. He was loved by everybody. So Obaewari the first also loved him. So he was a man who wanted to prove that beyond his worth, beyond the what he has attained in life, he wanted to also be recognized as a warrior in the canons of history of the Benin people. Of course, the major reason we're not talking about the history of the Edaiken is because he eventually became a warrior because he was an outstanding man. So the attribute of being outstanding in one's time, it's most important, because if he wasn't outstanding, you and I wouldn't be talking about him today. This is an event that happened almost 600 or over 600 years ago, and we're still talking about it. That means it became a very astounding personality. He served his Oba diligently until there was a time the Oba wanted to test the might of his loyal servant, of course, or loyal noble. Iken was a noble though, because he was a powerful man and well respected in the society. So there were some recalcitrant Owo or Ogo. The Benins regard them to as Ogo people because we discovered they are very respectful. Where we're not called Owo. Owo is in present day Ondo State. So there was some recalcitrant, the Owo people became recalcitrant to the imperialism of the Oba of Benin. So Oba of Benin needed to teach them a very high-handed lesson. So he sent a military troop to completely vanquish them. So, and the head of that troop that was delegated was Iken. Iken, the brave, that respected personality in the Benin Kingdom, was mandated by His Royal Majesty Obaewari the Great, as the first, to go on that war voyage. So, of course, before he left, he therefore now asked Obaiwari to take care of his household on his behalf, pending on when he returns from that war. So he asked Obaiwari that please take care of my household before I return from my war voyage against the Owo people. So instead, Obaiwari sent his first surviving son, the first surviving son, which was Kwoboyuwa. The Benins remembered him to be Kwoboyuwa. Now, he sent his first surviving son, Kwoboyuwa, to go and take care of the household of Iken, who is now in present day Uselu. Because I had said before now that at the time of Iken, the word Uselu had not existed, because it was during Obaisige where he went to hide his mother, Queen Idia, and then the Benin chiefs were able to catch or to locate where Obaisige hid his mother, and the Benins now called it Oyesunu. Oyesunu is still happened, and it was now corrupted to Uselu. The real word was Oyesunu, which is now corrupted. That happened about over 100 years later, or 150 years later, after the invent of Iken. So there is no way that place was called Uselu, but it was the area of the present day Uselu that Iken had his family. So Obaiwari sent his first surviving son, Kwoboyuwa, to go and look after the household of Iken. Now, by that instant, he became an Edai, that the holder of Iken's family. That's what the Benin. If you hold something in trust of another person, the Benin refer to that person as Edai. Abi me Edai nogi. I'm Edai odionwe. So when you hold something in trust for another, for the real owner, you are the Edai to that person. So he became Edai. Koboyuwa was not the Edaiken. He was holding the household of Iken on behalf of Iken, because Iken was far away. He had traveled to a war for that war conquest. Of course, that Edaiken became abridged as Edaiken. It's supposed to be Edaiken. It's not Edaiken. All right. So that's where the word Edaiken came from. Of course, remember that it was the first surviving son, all right, of the Oba, Obaiwari the first, that became Edaiken. So that makes the practice of the first surviving son of every Oba of Benin being regarded as Edaiken, which herein means the crown prince, So Iken actually went to the Owo War, fought that war, and won. The Owo people were defeated as expected. So he had to give a standing order for his troop to return back to Benin, while he tarried a little longer in the territory of the defeated Owo people. So during the night, the Owo people, the few remaining escapee, were able to recoup and killed Iken. So Iken never returned from that war. So it was not ascribed. The Benin now have a parable for that event. Iken no gwoko no magule. Iken no gwoko no magule. Translated, Iken, who is a master of war front, of war, but who does not know when to run, or when the chips are down, when you need to escape. So that's why the Benin now say Iken no gwoko no magule. All right. So eventually, Kwoboyuwa, the first son of Obaiwari the first, became the first Edaiken of Uselu. All right. Edaiken of that territory, because it was later on that the word Uselu came forth from, or Yesunu came forth from. All right, so it is not customary that every Oba of Benin, before he becomes the Oba, as the Edaiken, must hold forth at Uselu, almost in the axis of Iken's household. All right, must stay there before he becomes the Oba of Benin. Every Oba must become an Edaiken at Uselu before he becomes the Oba of Benin. Although there is one exception. There is one exception to that history. The historians remember that Oba Voramen did not go to Selu. All right, did not go to Selu. Was a Daiken at Urubi. Now, Prince Idugbowa, who later became Oba Voramen Ogbaisi, mother's uncle, all right, was an Ero. An Ero is a custodian of Urubi. So that's where he became a Daiken, and from there, that's where he went on the coronation journey to Benin. So Oba Voramen is regarded, or Prince Idugbowa became Oba Voramen, is regarded as the only Edaiken who did not stay at Uselu. But customarily, from that event of what happened during Oba Ewari the first, sending his first surviving son Koboyuwa to take care of the household of Iken as a Daiken, it becomes a customary practice for the Oba. For before you become the Oba of Benin, you must first of all become a Daiken of Uselu. All right, the Benins tends to make customary definition of a particular event to become symbolic. Another very good example was during the traverse of Prince Ogun, the same Obaiwai the first. He climbed a palm tree. That palm tree was like where he was taking palm fronds from, because he has to feed on fruits. So that's where he was taking palm front from, that sustained him from all through his travel during that region of the present day part of Uselu. So he was always climbing that palm tree to pick palm front from to eat at that time. So when he now became the Oba, now became customary that to every Oba must climb that palm tree. That palm tree has stayed there for over 600 years. Even before Oba Ewari became the Oba, the palm tree was already there. So the palm tree is still there. The Benins refer to that palm tree as Udin, Ore, Amamieson, Amiwa. It's a symbolic palm tree because a man who do not suffer, Amamieson, Amiwa, will not stumble into worth. If you don't suffer, you don't become worthy. So suffer before worth. So that's what the Benin come that palm tree. Dinamame say every crown prince on his way to Benin must climb that tree as a sort of a symbolism of what the tree was to one of the Oba. Obviously, that was Oba Ewari the first. So I hope the listeners now eventually understand where the practice of a Daiken, every first surviving son of the Oba of Benin must be an Edaiken of Uselu. Now, before I round up, there's a particular part I needed to talk about. Now, the Koboyuwa had a younger brother called Izuwara. For reasons of envy and their wives coming in between two of them, I don't want to go into that particular history, led to two of them having bad minds for each other, like two brothers, and they eventually killed themselves and died the same day. All right, it was a very tragic day of Benin history. So in that case, Obaewari now gave a prophecy that has never been broken till date. That because it was a very painful that is Edaiken, his first son, died before he became the Oba. So the Oba now made a prophecy, which is prophecy has never so has never been broken. That prophecy was Owu Eyi Kobaye Daiken. So death cannot meet the crown prince until he becomes the Oba. So from that time when Koboiwa uh, died because of the envy between him and his younger brother Ezowara, was a Nogi of Iyowa community. So the Benins have never recorded that any other crown prince died before they became the Oba of Benin. So and then that Koboiwa, it's highly referred to as the father of the Owa people. A larger part of the Owa people came from Koboiwa. Then the other parts of the Owan people came from Ozolwa, most especially the Ora people, Sabogida Ora. So you see how connected all ethnic groups in Benin are, in Edo State are, and across Edo State. So I want to thank each and every one of you for paying attention to this very short Benin history, and I hope we can be able to learn. So you can always drop your questions, and we'll see how we can be able to profile historical solution or answers to every questions being asked. It is time for we to put our history out there, because we've not really talked about our history, and that is why other tribes are trying to encroach on our history and trying to corrupt it, conscript it, and change it. They take the glory of the Benin and beautify it as their glory. We must say no, and we must always remember the Oba of Benin. It's a king like no other king, and our loyalty to the revered throne of the Oba of Benin is unallowed, and it will forever be strong and forever be unbroken. Obaga Tokbe Ise. My name remains Emaswan Amogwe Izoduwa.